Scott and already. Now you see why I got these ladies together. You guys, welcome to Hurd St. Andrew's Library, or Cynthia Graham Hurd's St. Andrew's Library. And this is our Kwanzaa program. So how this came about is I wanted to bring the question and the answer together. And that is one of the themes that we have for our library under the name of the person who was named after. She was very big in getting the question and the answer together. And if she couldn't get them together, she was going to find it and give it to the other one. It was always about making sure. And she was also big in the community. So, literacy is a problem area that we do have in the African American community. Me being a parent, I see it all the time, volunteering at schools, working here at the library for the past 20 years, all the time. So I thought, let me get some experts. And we could drill them and ask them, what can we do as a body to help our community, to help our kids? And not only our kids, it's adults too, because there are adults that are having issues with literacy. And I am so proud of that Palmetto Excel program, the new adult high school diploma, not GED, but high school diploma. I love it. I talk to them, they are wonderful. And so that's why we are here today, okay? I am going to introduce our panelists. We have Mrs. Ryan Jenkins, author and community activist. She's been writing since she was in the 6th grade, you guys. Okay. Over 30 years, she inspired to entertain and educate through poetry, novellas, journalism, and performances. Her performance name is Anointed Misfit. I love that.
Oh, wow.
In 2021, she can add the name author to her resume. After 2024, she has self-published 3 poetry anthologies. What is up is her next children's book, A Blessing for the World, and her first middle grade novel, Reverse. Okay? She was a middle school teacher for 19 years. God bless you. And a high school teacher for 1. She's a mentor and a program director for Crown Hurd, formerly known as Rose's Mentoring Program. She is the mother of a brilliant king. Okay? And next we have Miss Regina Duggins. That's my little troublemaker. She was born and raised in Coney Island, Brooklyn, New York. 13 years ago, she moved to Charleston, South Carolina, with the goal of bringing her mother back to her birth state, specifically in St. George, South Carolina. She is the devoted aunt and a mother figure to 5, her nieces, her nephews, her range in ages 19 to 27. One of her nephews.
Excuse me.
Oh, you got them with the wrong age.
No, they just turned 28 today.
Oh, my birthday!
He's 28 today.
28.
Right.
One of her nephews, whom she's considered her son, is autistic and serves as her inspiration for becoming a special education teacher. She is currently a teacher at a military magnet, and all the kids love her. Okay. Next was Christina Washington, the Queen. You guys, I see her all over Facebook doing all type of activity. I had to reach out to her. She is the author, a poet, spoken word artist, and a motivational speaker who is dedicated to using her craft and her love for literacy to inspire the next generation of young writers. Her published works includes a collection of poetry entitled Brainstorming and the Palmetto Rose That Grew from Charleston. She is also the author of her children's book, Magic Mirror. Christina is a local writer and a community organizer native to South Carolina, Charleston, South Carolina that is. She sees herself as a positive product of an underprivileged urban environment. Right. I love that. Because if you're from downtown Charleston, or really almost any part of Charleston, that's what we're looking at. Okay? She often refers to her passion of reading and writing as her saving grace, which drives her work around supporting school and district literacy initiatives and inspiring creativity and others. Ms. Quinetta Queen, the Executive Director of Elementary Learning in the Community. Ms. White has served as the interim executive director for the elementary learning community since 2023, with a distinguished career in education spanning over 13 years. Being a classroom teacher in Miami, Florida in 1992, she later held the key roles, including mathematics facilitator and a lower quartile mathematics teacher. She served in 2009 assistant principal at Sanders Clyde Elementary and intern principal also, and the principal of James Simmons Elementary, 2012 to 2017. She implementation of the full Montessori program and opened a new school facility. Later, she became the principal at A.C. Cochran Elementary, focusing on community partnership and student success. Ms. Michelle Johnson, certified diversity executive, CED practitioner. Michelle Johnson is certified diversity executive and equality coach, specialized in fostering culture, competence, and equality in education. With advancement degrees and certifications in counseling, teaching, and diversity, she also created African American Studies curricula, founded mental health and HBCU fairs, and developed inclusive programs. She was honored awards such as the Gullah Geechee Corridor Classroom Competition winner and the Avery Research Center Teacher of the Year. Come on. All that. Her community engagement involved board memberships, preservation efforts, and mentoring groups. We also will have the reading partners. They will be inside the library today between the hours of 1 and 3. You can set up to have your child get a partner with her school, or you can actually set up to be a part of the Reader Partners volunteer program. And we have our facilitator, our children's librarian, Ms. Tiffany Williams. She's the children's library manager here at the Cynthia Van Purdy St. Andrews Library. After teaching preschool for a decade, she decided to pursue a passion in literature and attend the University of North Carolina, Greensboro, and become a librarian. After graduation, she was hired as a media specialist at the same school where her mother also worked at the same role.
I'm happy to be here today with these lovely women. I've had a chance to go around and talk to them and hear their stories, and feel like the advice that they're going to give for these questions, the answers for these questions will be beneficial to all of us, and we'll all take something out of here that we can take back to the community and hopefully help out with our babies and helping them improve their reading, okay? Ms. Patrice gave us a list of questions. I'm just going to follow the list, and we can just start at the end and work our way down for everybody to answer. Well, you know what, we can change it up sometimes. We can start there, sometimes we can start here, okay? But we'll start with the first question, which is, why is literacy important in the African American community?
I believe that literacy is important in every community, but why it's critical in our community because we have so many of our young people, not just young people that don't read or aren't where they should be. I think, and I hate to say this, but for lack of a better term, we've dropped the ball in a lot of areas. We live in an advanced world now where reading is not as important as it should be. So I'm glad to be a part of something like this. I often say I grew up during a time where I know classmates of mine did not finish school, and these are people that are raising children now. They themselves can't read to certain levels, so it's not impossible, but nearly impossible for them to promote or help the young people to get to where they need to be, where they themselves are struggling. A lot of times when we would go to the schools or sit in these meetings, that's one of the things I would stress to the panel or those who are in charge, because I know for a fact that's a struggle. Like when we look at why we don't have the turnouts that we would like to see at these meetings, a lot of the times the parents don't really understand the language that's being talked about, and they feel like a lot of things go over their head, and rather than admit that, then I shy away from it. And so that trickles down to the children. You know, a lot of people, you know, I'm not going to say they don't think that they need it, but it's all fun and games until you are faced with a situation where you struggle. So now your family suffers because you couldn't ask for the help you needed to not only help your children but help yourself. And I feel like, you know, just like I tell them, that was kind of my story. My mom wasn't an avid reader. She started having kids young. So I can remember being like maybe 12 years old reading some mail to my mom. She could read, but not that well. And it's not to put her down, but because I feel like she did everything in her power to make sure I had the things I needed. You know, I've always been that child that had, that was in the gifted and talented programs. Like if I had to be somewhere, she made sure I was there. But she would always say, I don't know where you get that from, the reading or whatever. But I think she did the best that she could. And I think sometimes that's just something that we see not enough people doing enough of. And today, you know, we have these things, but just like even look today, we would love to see these rooms packed, but I feel like, I'm not going to say they don't think it's important, they just don't know where they fit in because they themselves are struggling. So that's why I think it's important for us to have these type of gatherings, but use the things that we learn here to carry back into the community, because a lot of times the community ain't coming to us. We going to have to go to them.
Thank you, Queen. How can I follow up on such a wonderful speak? But why literacy, I feel, is important in the African American community. I didn't add and include because I'm always trying to find what to put in my bio, but I've been a literacy coach for 5 years at Military Magnet in middle school. As she shared about parents not having reading or being avid readers, my father, I was told that he didn't have but a third grade education, but he was one of the smartest men alive compared to what my older siblings have told me. But seeing the struggles that my mom also had faced. And so when growing up in New York, my mom really stressed for me to be in certain programs, and I was always wondering why. And then coming back home here to South Carolina, I started to learn what was not as important or as was valued as much. So working with the literacy program, I redesigned how our students learn. It's not always because I was told to do technology things, but I felt like they weren't speaking to me. So I incorporated making sure that I had listening, writing, and speaking, and incorporated where African Americans, we are more in tune with the arts. So I had them drawing or making project-based. So it kind of grew the literacy program, and I started seeing improvement in MAP scores. And so I knew that I finally had the formula of what was connecting to, especially our males, because I've noticed that more males were in the literacy program that I had taught. So I feel that it's important in the African American community to help us move to the next level. We need reading. And I had to say to my students that you are reading me, because when I walked in the room as your new teacher, you looked at me and you was like, let me feel Ms. Duggins out. And I said, that's reading. So I had to start making it simplified for them to get involved and want to do it and like it and know that they're doing it all the time. I said, how do you get from here to here? You had to read and know these signs. Yes, memorization. I said, but that's all a part of reading as well. I said, you remember, I said, and I talked to them about cues, you know, even if it's formal cues or it's non-formal. I said, all that is a part of reading. You know, so, and then I started to get books, and as we go down, I love these questions because the books have to be important to gravitate the students in, because they're not going to want to read something that they're not relative to. And that's why I said with me writing, it was my story, and I shared with someone in the room, you know, everyone has a story within them. So once we start to get African American and letting them, and I'm big on representation matters, that's another thing. So when you start seeing authors that look like you, do the things that you do, then you'll have that interest in reading. So that's why it's also very important that we include literacy in our community.
All right. No, that's great. And like you, I'm like, how do I follow behind what everyone said before me? So I'm always going to be following because I'm in the middle.
We'll start in the middle.
So, but also as I am an educator, and outside of education, I do practice as a diversity, equity, and inclusion and justice practitioner, working with teaching a course for College of Charleston and teachers in CCSD called Taking Action in the Classroom, which is to create equitable opportunities for students by developing teachers. And so, you know, if I could take the spin of this question, why is literacy important in the African American community? I think that lack of literacy is the juggernaut that is going to prevent equity and access. I truly feel like when you don't have numeric literacy, if you don't understand preservation literacy, if you don't understand scientific literacy, if you don't understand historic literacy, you know, beyond reading, but understanding those vocabulary tiers, and how does that lend itself to comprehension beyond just reading? What are you understanding? How are you able to apply what you've read? All of that is what I think of when I think about literacy. And so to me, I feel like literacy is extremely important because I, as a Charleston native, I've watched as communities have dwindled. People haven't been taught how to hold on to their communities and their homes. Folks don't understand heirs property. They don't understand preservation. And so when those landscapes change, then the school landscape changes. When the school landscape changes, access and opportunity changes. You have what we call borders created by settlers, where people come in and start to create gatekeeping opportunities that keep those natives out of learning about themselves or learning local culture. So I see literacy, when I think about literacy, I think of it on a broader scale. I see all of the things that are connected to it that help us preserve as human beings, as Charleston dwellers and natives, beyond just childhood. Because if you only limit it to schools, then how do students become lifelong students and learn how to advocate for themselves? Right. So those are the things that I think about in literacy, in addition to what you guys shared. My hope is for more parents to attend opportunities and to learn how to, not necessarily to teach their children, that's not what we're asking them to do, but how to safeguard those things that are put in place by schools and teachers that are passionate about making sure that they learn, how to make sure that they keep those things here so that they can progress as lifelong learners into college or into the military or going from high school to work or whatever it is they decide to do. Because our first thing is to become productive citizens. And so if without literacy, how do you become a productive citizen? How do you maintain, even if someone hands you the golden key to life and prosperity, literacy is that one thing that's going to seal the deal on how you hold on to those things. So that's, if I could just close with that, that's what I think about when I think about literacy in our community. I think of it as a need for all.
So, well done, ladies. I don't really need to say anything. However, I would like to share that reading is freedom. Mm-hmm. If we go back into our history, what was the one thing that Black people were not able to do? Right. They kept us from reading because they knew if we read and comprehend, we would be free. And so I try to instill the importance and go real deep. I know it hurts, it feels funny, you feel that tingling, but we have to. We have to feel the tingling. We have to make it hurt because our ancestors hurt a lot to pave the way so I could sit here.
Right.
When I became the principal at James Simmons, I was in awe when I looked at the history of the school. I stand on a lot of shoulders.
Right.
And I'm not supposed to be the principal of this school, right? However, with us instilling the love of reading, the importance of reading, and being that model, the reading African Americans, literature is important in the African American community so that we can be free.
Absolutely.
So I'll admit, just like the rest of them, I don't have that much to add. But one thing I want to translate is a lot of these kids are reading more than we think. I watch my son on TikTok, and the video is not getting views because all these kids are reading the views. The views go high when they are reading the comments.
Right.
They, like, he literally sits, and because I'll hear the same video looping over and over and over again, and I'm just like, what? That's the most entertaining part. You need to read the comments. So they're literally reading each other's comments and what each other people are posting on the videos. So they're engaged. So the kids read. It's just what exactly are we reading, and what are we teaching them how to decipher that information? Are we creating a culture in our home where we're exposing them to, even though they might be on TikTok watching some foolery, so do we counteract that with something that's more productive? Like, I always speak on how my mother, who's sitting right here, so she is a retired educator, but her and my father made sure, like, we went to go see Ron and Natalie Days when they came to Morris College. We went to Benedict College where Maya Angelou, she exposed us to things.
Right.
So it's like, that's why it's so important as an African American community to be exposed, because even though, if I really think about it, even growing up in the 80s and the 90s, we weren't exposed to Black history at the level we should have been. But because it was taught at home, I received that.
Right.
So it's one of those things where, are we having conversations with our children so when they come across information, they realize, that's foolery. That's not even real, because we taught them how to decipher that information and to process that information. So that's what I would speak on that, because they're especially with anime. If anyone has sat there and watched their kids, they have to read those transcripts on those kids are reading. It's just a matter of what are they reading, how are they deciphering that information, are we giving something else to give them nourishment versus just junk food.
So can I add to what she was saying? That's absolutely true. I had a creative writing course. It was at Mitchell. This was some years ago. I think back in like 2017. And you know, the kids were there, and most of the activities there were fun based or whatever. So when they got to the creative writing, they're like, "We gotta write, we gotta read." So when I made them look at it just the way you're saying, I was like, "What's your favorite video game? What's your favorite TV show? The way you talk and text or whatever, all of that is reading." And so when they didn't look at they didn't look at it like that. And then I also brought in a book from Tupac. Like, they may not know all of his music, but they know who Tupac is. And I was like, well, y'all know he's a poet, and this. So just ways to make them not even understand that you're learning, you're reading, you're writing. So yeah, so absolutely, I agree.
Wonderful answers to these questions. Making parents aware of what's going on and getting them involved. Exposing kids to things and representation, and trying to make sure that they understand the relationship to the things that they're reading are all great ways to help include literacy in the community. So the next question is, what is the challenge for developing strong literacy skills?
I guess I can
Oh,
start.
here's we start back over.
One of the challenges, number one, you have to be you can't tell your child to read and you don't read. That it doesn't work that way. So you also have to give them access to materials. So whether it's going to the public library, but also fostering things that they like to read. I'll admit, despite the fact that we even got paid to read books back in the day, and my mother was like, you gonna read these books and do the summer program, I wasn't really engaged in reading. I remember books here and there. Ironically, it was when I knew I was gonna be an educator, and I came across Sharon Flake and Sharon Draper, and was like, oh my gosh, where were these books when I was in middle school? And the Bluford series. So reading those books, I knew I would eventually teach to my kids, and finding something that I like that initially gravitates towards my kids. So allowing finding something the child, they already like a video game, so finding a book that resembles that. A lot of kids don't realize the TV shows they like to watch, that was a script first. Somebody had to write that. So the same stuff you like to watch on TV, like I tell people in a minute, like the series that came out on Hulu, Black Cake. Read the book first. And so much they left out.
Yeah.
So it's like, it's just getting them to find things they like. Don't be afraid of graphic novels,
Yes.
comic books, because those things really do engage our kids. Like anime has taken on our community more than we realize by storm. So stuff like just making sure we're not force feeding our kids, trying to find a balance of something that they like to read or their interests.
So I think the challenge, there are so many challenges, but I believe, I talked with Regina about this earlier. Growing up in a small town, we had a village. And education, the pastor looked at our report card. We had YPDers and 4-H, and the neighbor, when we walked down the street, she was like, I know y'all got report cards today, how, you know, and so not that my mother was able to read to me, unfortunately, but that little magazine that I brought home where she could order books, we could order books, it made it, Scholastics, that was like, oh my goodness, it was like Christmas.
Yeah.
And so she instilled the importance of reading, although, you know, my older sister, she modeled reading, she took us to the library, in oratorical contests. So reading is vast, right? And then so our teachers, they made sure I had to memorize Paul Laurence Dunbar's poetry and get in front of the whole community and recite it. And so that's reading. So it's so important that it's a challenge that we don't have the village anymore. So in the school and in the community, we have to work collaboratively to make sure that we get out and distribute books. We read to children, we have reading time and sessions with children, and make sure that our books are in poetry and recipes and newspapers and magazines, and everything is diverse and interested, and students are interested in it and making that connection. They have to be connected to whatever they're reading.
Right.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes. And so, again, yeah, I'm going to amen everything they said. I just want to second that by saying access. I think access is very important. Making sure that not only students have access to books, but also our educators and, like you said, parents as well. Sometimes you can't share what you don't have access to. We chatted earlier about you don't know what you don't know. Right. And so sometimes just putting those books in the hands of parents as well, putting opportunities for them to see, okay, look, this is what your child is interested in. Like you said, graphic novels as well. I remember when that was frowned upon, but now we know, that that's another way to engage students. And so maybe sometimes if we have to share with others that there is another avenue. There are other opportunities to engage students besides the traditional canon.
I would say exposure. I'm big on that. I was blessed enough to say that, like community partners, and even though Gwinnett and you all were in the South in New York, we were having that. building that foundation, I was grateful for being 16 and chosen to be a youth leader of my tennis association in the building was huge for me. So having the exposure to meet Mayor David Dinkins back then, getting linked in with Hurd, I didn't know what was going on, but I was put in those places so that I can share those experiences to people who came after me. And also, I was put in rooms with adults, so it's like I was before my time. And I always felt like, yeah. Because I'm 47, and a lot of the experiences that I've had, people look at me like, you know, but I'm grateful because it's like my ancestors were preparing me. I feel my grandmother, a lot of times I talk about what she didn't have and what they did not have. They made sure like I was that grandchild or that child that had it. So when I say exposure, even raising my nieces and nephews, it was big for me, my children. It was big for me to take them to museums. It was big for me to take them to Kwanzaa festivals. It was big for me to take them to just areas that I probably wasn't exposed to. Even my mom, I'm taking her to places that she didn't get to go to. So she's grateful to say, you know, she's having that learning experience. She's 81, God bless, you know. So I think the challenge is if we don't know. So if you don't know, you're not going to. But then we lean back to community and schools. Can you give those students that exposure?
Yeah.
You know, how can we know what's going on in the homes because we've been equipped, we've been knowledgeable to have this break or the barrier. So how do we fulfill it and help with the challenges? And if you know, financially, it may be an issue. Sometimes, like I've even gotten a screening to come in of September in the library at Military Magnet. Hey, if we have to get a sponsor, but at least we cannot take everybody on the trip. But now the screening was able to be shown in the school. So they got the exposure. I knew the contact at the Peer Theater. Okay, and that's why I said sharing resources. If you have all of this here, you can help more to break down some of these challenges. So that exposure, sharing wealth. You know?
All right, so of course I 1,000%. Come on, Auntie. Hi, Auntie. I'm putting you on like I agree 1,000% with everything that was already said. But the one thing I will say is me being a community, I like to say community groomer. I don't like community activist. I feel like one day, you know, I feel like the black community or community at large need to stand on their own 2 feet. So I'm a groomer and I want to see that one day. So we don't always need a leader, so to speak. But I feel like, I always tell people one of the biggest challenges that I've seen as being a person in the community is the movement ain't moving because it ain't popular. And a lot of the times, popularity is one of the biggest challenges. We don't have enough young people that are willing to march to the beat of their own drum, so to speak. I was kind of, when I was growing up, a little weirdo because I like the things that maybe my peers didn't always like. But I stood on that. I could be their friend and I can still be me. And I wish that, I think that's one of the biggest challenges that we see. So it may not be cool or popular to be the smart person or the person that reads a lot or whatever. They don't want to be labeled a certain way from their peers. We, you know, and especially with the presence of social media, because it's not nowadays like when we at school, you want to look cool in front of the people you're in school with, but now you got everybody on social media. Just like if we see kids engaging in some type of behavior, it could be a fight. Everybody, thousands of people have seen that fight versus just the people in that contained space or where the fight might have took place. So I just think that's one of the biggest challenges that we see. Just the whole, you know, them not being confident enough to say, you know, well, hey, I like this and I want to do that. But it poses a challenge when things aren't deemed to be popular. And reading is one of those things. So, yeah.
These are also great answers. Exposure, doing things that they're interested in. Doing the unpopular thing. Right. When I was a teacher, I have one kid, I guess I was so different from the other teachers. He asked me, he said, you know that you're kind of a weirdo? I said, yes. That's just what it is, you know? Yeah, in a good way. Yeah. But that's just kind of what it is. Sometimes you have to be different in order to get things done or to help people see that, you know, it's not so bad, you know. but that's just how it goes, trying to get kids to step out of that box.
Right.
You guys have kind of touched on this a little bit, so if anybody just wants to randomly answer the next question, I'll throw it out there and you can say what's on your mind. But it's how can parents support their children's literacy at home?
We touched
So,
on
if anybody want to add anything else to it?
Well, one thing we mentioned, I was speaking with Michelle, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so what they're not, because I'll admit, even me, because of social media, my attention span is not what it once was. So I don't sit down and read books. I listen to them. So there are resources through the public library. We were talking about that earlier, how it's Libby and Hoopla, I know in Richland County and Columbia, South Carolina, I'm pretty sure it's down here too, where you can listen to the books. You can listen with the books with your kids. They have apps on their phone. They can download that app and read the books. So that's another way to get them engaged. Because there are a lot of audiobooks. Now I understand how people used to sit in front of the radio and listen to. That's the same way with audiobooks. Like the animation. I think his name's Guy Lockhart. And he's done a lot of Jason Reynolds books. He's actually an actor. I can't think of the show right now on CBS. But to hear him read the book, it's him, Bonnie Turpin. When they read the book, you are immediately engrossed in whatever they're reading. So that is a good way for any age. If you struggle with reading, start with the audiobook. And it's free.
I think I'm obligated as an educator in Charleston County Schools. I would be remiss if I did not say that we as school leaders have to embrace our parents. We have to open the door. We sit at a table and we have all these acronyms and we have all this verbiage that can be very intimidating for parents. And once we break down that barrier, it's not easy, but we have to have that relationship with parents. And it's go to them. Thank God for parent advocates. So as a former school leader, I had a parent advocate, and we would go to parents and take books and take the iReady or MAP assessment and explained it to grandma sometimes had the children, or whomever is there with the supporting the children, and explain to them, hey, this is your child's goal, and all we want you to do is encourage your child to reach their goal. That's all you have to do. Grandma, we've had great grandmothers taking care of 4 and 5 children, bless their hearts. And we would go to them and say, great grandma, all we want you to do is say, all right, I want you to reach your goal. So helping them understand what we're talking about in school, because it's really hard. It's different from when they were in school. And so we have to, I think the key word is trust.
Yeah.
So we have to build the trust and the relationship between home and school, because it definitely is a marriage. And when it works well, it works well.
Yes.
All win.
Yes.
Right? We all win.
And I like how you mentioned trust, because that is a huge issue in education where parents really feel like, and I say we because I'm a former educator, we're out to get their child. And we're not, because sadly we've had some colleagues who were out to get their child or did not service them to the best ability. I mentioned Jason Reynolds because I'm a huge fangirl over him. He couldn't think of 2 teachers that really impacted his life. This is a grown man. That should not be as a child. All your teachers somehow, some way should have impacted you in some way. So it's like creating that trust and make sure they know I'm here for the same reason you're here and to better service your child.
And it's just fear of the unknown, because when we look in the African American community, because this is the subject, because it's Kwanzaa, that we're talking about the African American community, we have a long way to go. We're in Charleston. Gaston Warp is not far from, where majority of our ancestors came, so we have to have that conversation, the hard conversation. And most of our teachers are not of African descent. And so we have to love on them and support them and teach them and help them build that bridge and that connection. When you go, I don't have a fear when I was at Sanders Clyde, walking on America Street and knocking on the door and walking down and sitting in with my, hey, you sure smell good in here. You know, you break down, you gotta break down that wall and build that community, but that has to be taught for other ethnicities and cultures who that is scary for them, I'm sure, and it's scary for people who are not from the South, who come from up north or come from other places. And so it's a hard road, it's a tough road, but one child at a time, one family at a time, and we can do it if we keep having the conversation.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, I'm a hush.
Would anybody else like to?
The only thing I would add is that my daughter and I would swap books, and we went to the library quite often. And sometimes, like, things that I like to read, like, she would challenge me to be like, you know, especially when she got in, like, high school. She's like, I think you might like this. You need to stop reading the same thing. Read this. And I read The Count of Monte Cristo or something like that, something I wouldn't read. And she was, but I liked it. I enjoyed it. So, you know, she kind of did that for me. So I would pick up things I think she would like. So I feel like if reading is a thing in your household, maybe sometimes you need to probably step out your comfort zone, and that's a way to be supportive to your children.
I agree. Show them interest in something that they
That they would,
encourages them to keep reading more so they can get you again. Hey, read this one.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I just want to give kudos to Queen. With you having the reading books on Facebook or telling us to watch a movie and then come back, we're going to
I do
have
that all the time.
it's bringing that at home.
I didn't even think about that.
See, I'm here.
I
for
do
you,
that
girl.
all the time.
It's that sister
Because I read
circle.
a lot. I read all the time.
No, but I mean, she tells like, you
And
know,
I will put
honestly,
up books.
she's like,
I put up
okay,
movies.
she'll right, and then she's like, okay, well, by what in a month, get back, we're gonna be I'm going live.
And I
Listen,
tell them all
and she's like, I'm
and
going
if I ain't
live.
ready,
And
I'ma
if you
tell
ain't
the
ready,
whole
she
book,
gonna
so
tell the
I'll
whole
get
book. So
better.
you can still, but she said still tune in.
Still tune in.
And so,
yeah.
but it's giving the person who's
I love
not
to
a
read.
reader
Mhm.
that exposure because they might have not read the book. And they'll say it, you know, I didn't read, but I'm tuning in because they have an interest.
Right.
So you're starting that connection at home, like, okay, maybe next time, and then you say next time be ready because, and she puts you on the spot, so you're like, okay, well, I'm gonna tune in next time, and you didn't read, you gotta write. She's like, well, and so it's, if you want to stay in this circle, you know, so you make it popular, but hey, listen to me.
We definitely need to connect.
But she's making it popular.
Yeah.
Right, and I feel like you're right. So those who may not be reading like that, they might go
You
and
have
read.
to let them know what's out there, because you're already on, you're already scrolling on social media. I actually do, I don't go live, even though there's one book I read lately, My Sister's a Serial Killer. Have y'all read that?
No.
So I was like, I need someone who has read this book, because I would love to, because I do a podcast too. And I said, I would love to talk about this book. To me, you need to
I
connect.
read it.
But also, when I'm reading books, I promote it. Like, I
I take
promote.
pictures of them.
Yeah.
I always, I buy books, I order books, whatever. I take a picture of them, and I'll be like, hey, if y'all wanna, I'm gonna read this book. I ain't gonna take me. If you wanna get it, especially like Sister Soldier book just came out, so
Yes.
she's very popular.
Right.
I was like, I know some people like, oh, I'm gonna order that. I'm gonna order that. I'm like, I'm gonna give you a month now.
Right.
I'm gonna read the book in this week, but I'm
Yeah.
gonna give you a month.
Yeah.
But I do that. But a lot of times I just promote. Like, what's the guy? He's a popular Omar Epps. He
Yeah.
got a book out.
Yeah, he has two.
Yeah, he has. Yeah, and I bought the last one that came out because he was on the Breakfast Club, and I hear about stuff and I order and I promote it and whatever. So yeah, see, I forgot about that. I do that. You don't even think it's natural. You don't even think about it.
We have a question.
I just wanted to throw in, because I'm watching the sisterhood that's happening right now. But I'm an educator as well, librarian. Everything that you talked about doing alternatives in education has worked well. But I noticed when I was looking at the questions, one thing that is missing that's very important is the black male role in literacy.
Yes.
That's been my biggest hurdle. I'm from Washington, D.C., and many of the programs that work well in Washington, D.C. after dealing with the history of the Great Migration, Jim Crow, Reconstruction, all the different things, when I moved down here, it was like I went through a time machine. And so most of my energy was spent working, and primarily working with young men, and getting them to understand. So I'm not gonna take any of your time, just wanted to throw in that because I don't see it in there, but I always have to advocate, because I am working on a program called Mr. Circle.
Okay.
I've got sister circles,
Right.
Mr.
Okay.
Circle, but one of the stigmas and the stigmatizing that happens when I go from school to school to school, and I'm trying to connect with young men, and there's only one other man in this room right now, right? And in library systems, I always have people look around the library and see how many black men are here. I moved from different branches to Wando on purpose because I knew I'd be the only black person and black male out there at Wando. People walk in the library and they go, oh, there's a black man working here. Can't tell you how many times people think I'm the janitor or the security guard. And I have to let them know I'm the librarian and I work in children's libraries. How do we work on destigmatizing? Because of the many, many generations of Jim Crow, work on destigmatizing that a black man is somehow a sellout, a wannabe, sound white, act white. I was raised by 5 black women that taught. Ms. Johnson, Ms. Lockhart, Ms. Lewis, Ms. Smith, and Ms. Wright. Those are the women who broke me down in literacy. Kindergarten, 4th grade. And then, of course, my own mother. My father and I didn't get along. He wanted me to play sports. Every black man in my life wants me to play sports because I'm built for sports and play it. But my father rejected me because I told him I'm leaving the football team to go be in the biology club. And so, how do we work on destigmatizing that? I have my programs, and if you want to ask me questions about them, it's fine. But what have you accomplished or experienced?
Okay, so I spoke earlier and I said being a literacy teacher, that's who I came across because that was most of the clientele I serviced, was black males and Hispanic males. Let me not even leave them out as well. So finding books that was related to them. You know, so if they were interested in sports or computers or some even scientists and making experiments and things. So I had to go into those because this is what they like. So that exposure again, and just making sure, bringing in male mentors. You know, one thing I'm going to give kudos to my principal, Mr. Dr. Perino. He had a literacy day out on the quad at Military Magnet. And he got on a loudspeaker, he was just like, okay, because we have middle and high. He said, okay, at this time, teachers, I'm going to be sitting on the quad reading my book, because we was reading Across America, and Dr. Seuss there. He said, tell the students to come on out the classroom. Send them out on the quad. Everybody's like, oh my God, we got to do a count. He's like, send them to the quad. And he said, I want them to bring their book. He said they can bring a chair. He said they want to sit down on whatever, but I'm going to be out here with them. So he showed, because there's a lot of male representations in Military Magnet as well, but releasing the students, and they went straight down to the quad. We didn't have to, facilitate watching things and see. They went out there and they sat out there and read with him. So having that male mentor, having that exposure, and giving that, step back from what we're always so used to holding on, that made a difference that day. And those kids were asking, Dr. Perino, when are we going to do that again? Can we read with you again? And he said, sure, no problem. Sometimes even at the game, he'll, sit, or he'll have someone, like he'll sit and read. And so it's exposure. And one thing I want to say about you, in the education field, we women have to take some of that stigma off. Because there have been males that have done wrong to children, but that doesn't mean every male that comes into the education system is coming in with that look. They really want to be a presence. And so we have to also start to welcome men in, and letting them, one thing, be a man.
And can I add to that point?
Yes.
We have to be intentional.
Yes.
So when leading a school, A.C. Cochran, Fair Winds is down the street, some things pop off every now and then. The leadership team and I, we were intentional about hiring black males, teachers. That one black male in that building made such a difference. The presence, I had children walking up to me that wasn't in 5th grade and saying, Miss White, next year, can you put me in Mr. So-and-so's class? I'm like, I can't put everybody in Mr. So-and-so's class. I mean, and they males bring such a presence, understanding, to break down that fear, to see them as educators. Call Me Mr. is a great program. I literally call up in Orangeburg to Call Me Mr. and I'm like, who's graduating? When they come to Charleston, I'm like, we're welcoming them at Cochran. We bring them all to the school. I literally am in the hallway cheering them on when they walk through the halls. And so I am breaking down, showing them that, hey, they're safe.
Yeah.
They're okay. Yeah. We want them in our building, but we all have to. White women, black women, purple women, green women, every woman in this world, and media has to do a better job of portraying our black males. So it's something that we as educators, especially leaders of buildings, must be intentional about hiring them and helping them. The test is not easy, but when we work with them and help them to, there may be one class or one assessment that they need, take the chance. They are well worth it.
So I believe in being very intentional, like they said, having exposure, taking the time. Like I remember, certain schools I've noticed in Columbia, when they have literacy days or reading days, they employ all black males. Like they're very deliberate about that, from mentors in the program. So there is stuff being done, but I don't feel like it's enough. We also have to make sure when it comes to mentoring, it has to be not just coaching. So the cops can come in and have a great resource day with them where they're doing sports camps. Well, why not doing a reading and a writing camp and having males incorporated in that? So I definitely believe there's a need for it. But I also see where people are inhabiting that need. One of the things I discussed on my podcast, one of my former students who's now an educator who went through the Call Me Mr. program, and he admitted that education was, and for those who don't know, Call Me Mr. pretty much is trying to get more black males in the classroom. So depending on what school they attend, he said at Newberry he didn't have a full ride, but I've had heard of kids who they went to Call Me Mr. and had a full ride. And basically trying to get more males. And I heard it's not just us, it's other states across our country who's doing this. So he admitted education was not on his radar, but someone recommended him for the teacher cadet program at his school. And from there, he's like, I want to be a teacher. I don't see why I can't be a teacher. And he said, and I said, well, so what would we need to do? Because if you look at the statistics, black male teachers are only 1%. And he was like, he said, I've never been told to be a teacher. You're quick to be told to be doctors, engineers, or some type of sports. Well, why don't we tell our black boys to be teachers? And I'll admit, I had one young man who, I still pray for him. He's doing his thing, but I feel like whatever. But y'all know what I'm saying. So I'll never forget, we were doing what's called tutorials in this class that I taught. And I was like, dude, you ever thought about education? Like, how many of us have that conversation with our boys and say, you'll be great working with kids? How many of us actually say that to them? And it doesn't have to be necessarily being a teacher, but some type of mentor where you're working with young people and cause them to be better people. And I will admit, I see it happening. Can it be more? Of course.
Just want to add one thing. Please watch the movie The Forge on Netflix. I'm telling you, you'll have finish it, you'll have a different perspective, and it leads right up into what he's asking. And so we were saying we're looking for the question and the answer. That movie will give you that, and where to start, how to start the base on getting what he's asking as far as male representation in literacy.
Because I'm tired, I need more men.
And if I could add also, don't be discouraged by the numbers of young men participating, right? Because sometimes you may only have that one male show up, or 2 males show up, or a buddy that shows up. And sometimes, you know, I think that when we try to start initiatives, if we don't see the numbers that we would like, we get discouraged and quit. But you know, that one kid will bring another kid.
Yeah.
One of the programs that I started at James Island was called the Big Beyond program, and it's still going at James Island Charter High School now. And that came out of another mentor program, which was the United Brothers and Sisters Association, which we had when I was a student. It died, and when I came back to Charleston, I wanted to bring it back because it was so important to me. But that program started at Burke High School when I was in high school. In '92, it started at Burke, and it was called the United Brothers Association. And then they added on in St. Andrews, for those of you who are from Charleston, if you remember St. Andrews High School, Middleton High School, James Island. So what happens, I think, over time, these things drift, but you do have initiatives. I think that when the numbers begin to go low, folks abandon the cause. And so that would be my only thing, to not be discouraged. If you have 1 or 2 young men, those 1 or 2 young men, you know, can lead 5,000 other young men to come to the table and do those things.
So the only thing I want to add to what he said, and it has nothing to do with the classroom or not the teacher, but what he said about his dad, I picked up on that. We have a community of people that will rally behind athletes before they rally behind somebody wanting to be in education, wanting to be a doctor, wanting to be, you know, so that's why it seems like, you know, and it's the men. But my thing is, I grew up on Bayside. I went to Sanders Clyde. Shout out to Sanders Clyde. And I went to work. So yeah, I started a podcast that was called Streetlight Era, Back to the Basics. So my initiative in doing that was to try to figure out where we went wrong, so to speak. Because I feel like somebody spoke about village, having that village. You know, we have the village, but like I often say, the village is tainted. Because everybody you come in contact with, they're still a part. People like, oh, my village. No, everybody you come in contact with is still a part of that village, but not everybody is a good part of the village. That's just what it is. So I started this thing on that show that's called the OG Circle, which pointed out men who have lived in the neighborhoods that I grew up in, who either have lived the street lifestyle, done some time in jail or whatever, but they don't live that life anymore. And then you have men like that who are business owners, married men, whatever, that can't come into schools and be effective because of their background. Because I remember when Ricardo faced that when he first got out or whatever, and he did a whole lot for the community. So I think we need to focus on people like that, maybe engage more people or encourage more men like that who could be beneficial, because guess what? 9 times out of 10, when you teach in inner city schools, those are the men they look up to. Those are because that's what they grew up seeing. So if I grew up admiring somebody who was a hustler, doing things on the street or whatever, but they can speak to another side of that, right? Because I lived that and I don't live that anymore. So this is what that leads to. I mean, and granted, we say it, the parents say it, the mother say it, but I need to hear him say it. Because just like y'all saying, the way they look up or admire that teacher in the school, that's how they looking up at these men too. So a lot of men were on that show. We did like 5 shows, and at the time we had like 4 or 5 men just, and when you listen to the stories, all of the stories are the same. They mirror one another. When did you get an interest in the streets? 12, 13? Why? To help my mama, to help my family, to feed. A 12 and 13-year-old shouldn't be concerned with that. But the stories are so, you know, they're so similar. And so for them to have survived that, and they live a different life, and like they say, a lot of them like, the young children don't want to hear that, they don't want to hear that. They stay out the way a lot of the times too. But then some of them want to be impactful or want to come into the schools or other spaces and kind of shed light on that, but they're not allowed to. So I think we could do more, being more welcoming with that, or embracing men in that area too. Because it's all educational.
It is.
You know.
And that was a great question. And when I was a teacher librarian, when the kids would come in, some of them would have behavior issues. So I'd say, hey, if you do the right thing while I'm going through the lesson, I'll let you be the librarian for the day. And I would let them check people and check their books in, check them out, that kind of thing. And I would encourage them. I said, you'd make a great librarian one day. Because nobody encourages that either, teachers or librarians. And they would just smile and get excited about it. And so every week they want to come in and be the one that does that. But once again, it's getting kids to think outside of the box, getting parents to think outside of the box, to encourage kids to do that. I follow a librarian on social media. His name is Billy Allen. He has a page called Black Librarian Males, and he posts all about Black librarian males, and he's encouraging more people, more Black males to be librarians. And I feel like he's a really great, I guess, what's the word? I don't know. He's very inspirational, and in recruiting and trying to get more Black librarian males. So I think that's a great way just to get that out there and encourage other professions besides like the doctors and the lawyers and that kind of thing.
That's a great segue to number 4.
Well, we'll go on to number 4 then.
Oh, no. Oh, Lord, okay.
That's right. We'll start in the middle.
Doing great.
Some culturally relevant books or authors that promote African American stories and experiences.
Okay. So I think in terms of for high schools, I narrowed it down. I wrote a few down because I have a lot. I know we all probably have a lot. But I definitely would say Nick Stone. Nick Stone is fire. I love everything about Nick Stone.
Everything.
And I think that if you have teenagers,
Even
middle school too, that Nick is definitely a great avenue. I know we probably grew up with Walter Dean Myers, like you mentioned the Blueford series. Jason Reynolds, of course, is another one. There's so many, but Nick is just, I'm sorry, I'm biased.
Oh, me too.
Yeah.
I love her. She's a sweetheart. I met her 2 different times at events, and she's the sweetest person.
Really?
She did a classroom visit online with my kids a couple years ago.
Okay.
So she's really good people.
Yeah, and then I got a chance to meet her at NCTE, National Conference for Teachers of English, and she was amazing. So she's definitely the person that brings that spirit into the room. And
she also doesn't believe in long books. Some of our kids get intimidated about the length of the
Yeah.
books. I don't know what it is about YA. They feel the need to give us a dictionary. And some kids are going to read that, and that's awesome sauce. But it's something about giving a kid less than 150 pages. And she definitely, because she picks on Angie Thomas.
yes.
Because Angie Thomas is good, but
Yes.
it's encyclopedia.
Yes.
It's an encyclopedia.
Yeah.
So I mean, Angie Thomas is one that I love. I'm actually reading Ibi Zaboa, which I think any author that
Punching the air?
I'm actually reading, it's Okoye.
Okay.
It's based on Wakanda Forever, one of the warriors.
Okay.
So it's like Ibi Zaboa, Jason Reynolds, she's already echoed. I met him too. But Jason Reynolds, what I love about Nick Stone and Jason Reynolds is they write across the genre. Like
Yes.
they write about so many different things. Jason Reynolds wrote a book about going to visit his grandfather for the summer while his parents went away to a young man who witnessed his brother being gunned down for gun violence and deciding he wanted to take revenge for himself. So he writes across the stuff. It's very relevant. And then Ibi Zaboa is another one. Tiffany D. Jackson. That's more for high school. Somebody is going to die, but it's really good fiction. Oh my God, there's so much more. We said Nick Stone. Trying to think of who has a whole bunch of books.
And then even if you're looking for like literacy stuff, I guess if you're talking about professional level stuff too, there are some like Teaching to Transgress. That's one. I'm really into Jim Crow's Pink Slip. That's another one that I started. Oh my God. There's So I mean, but yeah, in terms of, I guess it depends on which angle you would want to start from.
See, a lot of the books y'all call it, I haven't read like books for young adults in a while, and I want to actually write one. You know, that's a goal. So I need to probably start reading that.
Yeah.
So what about your books?
Right, our books is.
I mean, yeah, of course.
Well, for me, the books that are geared towards children, A Blessing for the World is my first children's book, It's pretty much a love letter to our sons, reminding them that you are, despite what happens to you and what you think you are, a blessing for the world. So it's basically, my first children's book, I wanted to be based on my son. When I was pregnant with him, I was anticipating his birth, but when I finally decided to write the children's book, he was graduated from high school. So that's why it's called Blessing for the World. And then Reverse is loosely based on my childhood experience. Basically, the main character, Donovan, is a preteen love story. He finally comes to his best friend, Monica, and says, you know what, I love you. I want to be with you. And she's like, I don't know about that. So it's called Reverse because they go back and forth. And I'll admit, that's the first part of a potentially 4-part series. So I already have the sequel written to that one. We just got to work with my editor on that one. So that's available for release. So that's middle grades, and the Blessing for the World is definitely children, but I think middle school kids and high school kids can benefit from that too. So,
I have that same thing.
oh yeah, definitely.
And if you're looking for any literature in terms of understanding literacy, I guess, and the need, just to kind of piggyback on some of what we already kind of chatted about, Dr. Chris Emden is really, really rich. His book is one of the books that I use for the class that I teach called Ratchetemic. And he actually came with the acceleration schools. He came down last year and talked about that. So he talks about his experiences as an educator and how he had to get out of his own way, in his own comfort zone. As a black male educator, interested in rap, but also interested in reading and writing and science and all these things, in order to be accessible to his students. So him just being a black male presence wasn't enough. But it was what he was, I guess, imparting into them. They had to feel like they could reach that, or that they could connect with that. So there's like so many, oh my God. And if I could name a new one that I'm reading now that is not academic, if that's okay. Someone mentioned The Yellow Wife, and so I'm going to start that.
That was a good one.
Is that?
My book club read it last year.
Okay.
I have a question. With all the books, not all, a lot of black books are being banned. What's your feedback? Because you guys were talking about books and somebody said something about there's a little murder in this book or something.
Right.
But these books are being banned, and a lot of African-American writers, they're taking the books out of the school. So what are your viewpoint on that?
Well, we both realize, me and Michelle, we do book giveaways. So we go to communities and give out books for free. Nevertheless, as parents, as community organizers, we have to be more proactive with these school boards, because they're being very strategic. Like the law that just passed in our state this past year, the law wasn't even read. And they banked on the fact that y'all weren't going to read this law, so they were able to pass the law without anybody even reading the law. Because they just knew, oh, it's not going to get passed. But because they were able to put some proviso or something in the law, now literally things can be banned at standpoint. And some counties are worse than others. I'll admit Greenville, I know is really getting it bad. Richland County is very inclusive, I'll admit. So it's a matter of us being very proactive and letting people know, no, you can't ban this, but we see nothing wrong with it. Because nine, and I might be wrong, it's usually one parent that complains and says, I don't feel like, because I've had it happen to me where we were reading Fire from the Rock by Sharon Draper, which is based on the Little Rock Nine. And I was pulled into the office by my principal and asked, are you reading an Assalamu Alaikum book? And I said, it's about the Little Rock Nine. But what it was, my white parents went and complained to her because they felt like we were calling them racist. No, we're learning about the history of the Little Rock Nine. And I stood on 10 toes and did not back down. Long as she didn't, now if she would have said I didn't have to read it, sadly, I would have been that teacher, I would have read it anyway. But she didn't tell me I couldn't read it. But I told my kids what was the problem, and some of them admitted, I feel like you're calling us racist. And no one's calling you racist. We're learning about racist things that happen to people and how they overcame it. But again, just as they're proactive in saying what they don't want their children to listen to, we have to be proactive and say, make sure there's a vetting process, making sure we're at school board meetings, SIC, PTO. We have to really be involved to make sure they're not snatching things off the shelf.
And they really need to realize it's history.
Right. You may not like it.
It's foundation, it's history.
So, and it is sad because even when you look at the textbooks, I was watching, TikTok does have some good stuff, but they were showing this video how the passage started out with Rosa Parks was told to move from her seat because she was black, to the textbook edition got to the point Rosa Parks was just told to move. So it's like, sadly, but these are the books that are being approved, and these are the books that are being pushed through.
Right.
But again, if we are not involved, not just as parents, but as community advocates, or whatever you want to call yourself, they're going to keep, because what it is, they're being strategic about where they're placing people. We have to be strategic and let people know and have conversations, to let them know to be in rooms, so we can't keep letting this happen.
Right.
Yeah,
Exactly.
sadly, I work for York County Library, so y'all probably know who that is now. Because of all this.
When it's being those advocates, being the, like, I can advocate for literacy all day long, but I work here, I work for a public library. So it's like encouraging the community to advocate for exactly what you're saying, be it the county council meetings, be it school board meetings, be there when these people are put on the ballot, and you get out and vote. That is it. And I'll say it all day long until I'm blue in the face, but that's, and my staff know here, I'm the manager here, by the way.
And it does, like you said, it goes back to what we were talking about earlier, which is just literacy. Having beyond just reading. Do they understand laws? Do they understand the process of voting? Do they understand how the things work? And so, do they understand the process of vetting books? I think too, that people aren't necessarily afraid of being called racist. I think that folks that partake or participate in these type of activities are venturing to become better racists. And if I can put a spin on that, because if you can keep folks from knowing information, as we were chatting about at the table, if I can keep you from knowing, then I don't empower you to use your voice, nor do I empower any advocates to also use theirs. But the way I do that is by keeping that information out of the hands of anyone, whether they are an ally or the person who is being oppressed because they are being denied an opportunity to engage in a text. By doing that, I am still, pressing forward, I guess, with the agenda to ban books, but it's really to keep information. I can say for me, and we were talking about this earlier in I guess our pre-discussion, is that when I first heard about books being removed, I immediately went in and started to get certain books to secure them. And some of them, weren't on grade level, so it was great that they weren't on grade level, because I can say, okay, well, I can remove this because it's not on grade level. But for the books that were on grade level that I was afraid, I went on ahead and I just kind of put them in my office. And I marked them. I went through and marked them, but I tried to be proactive. But that still doesn't stop someone from challenging. I think they can challenge up to 5 times a text. So, even if I have a book and I have a backup book and a backup book, they can challenge the backup book and the backup book, So yeah, I do feel like there's some fear mongering there, but doing what you can, securing, giving, like we talked about, giving away those books, introducing, doing the podcast, putting it out there that these books are out there for you to read, and someone has them.
Now, when you talk about banning the books, and I understand what they're doing with all of this, but I'm looking at the foundation. At my church, we have what we call Freedom School, and it goes back to the family, the church, because they can ban the book from the school library, but they can't stop you from buying that book.
Exactly.
Yes.
And put it on your child's life.
Well, that's just the thing is, kids don't have money to go buy a book, and some families can't afford to buy books. So if they're not in the library, they're not gonna see them.
Well, that's where parents and as well as churches come in, and other community organizations where they can make sure these kids get the book for free.
Because the whole point of a public library system is free access. And sadly, in certain counties, like I can't remember, I think it's Greenville County, Any book that has to deal with anything with homosexuality or transgender, you have to have parent like they removed all those books and put in a section where you have to have a parent escort. Well, what about my parents can come with me to the library and I want to have access to that? And even if you don't believe in that or not, it's not up to me as a parent to restrict 1,700 kids in a school because I don't want my child to read that. No, it's called my child just can't read that. Because I've had that happen to me several times. This is going to be in the book one day. Where I have parents come in and say, I don't think y'all should be reading this book. And I remember one particular administrator said, then we'll remove your child while they're reading the book and they'll read something separate. And it's like, but now we've gotten to the point where people have, again, be strategic. They put themselves on school boards, they put themselves on county councils. So we have to be strategic and teach other people what to look out for, how to read, how to assess, okay, maybe we don't need to put this person, or hold people accountable.
Yes.
So we can make sure they have access because it's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. But again, the outreach and like, again, I get donations. I've actually had authors donate books towards me, and I go to certain neighborhoods and just give out. And they shut me out. This is free. Yes, these books are free. And they are always there. And I purposely, my book drives are all Black authors.
Right.
So it's like, here you go. Take 2 or 3 to start your library.
Yeah, it's another group called Representation Matters. Yeah, they do it every first Saturday, I think, of the month. They were up in the Whalen, and they move to different neighborhoods every year, I think. They stay in that particular neighborhood every year, and then they move, because they're going to be in Bayside, Bridgeview, starting February.
That's the big
So,
Oh,
yeah, I grew up there. I'm an advocate for Bayside. Oh, it is.
Bayside.
Bayside. It's Bayside.
Right,
It's not
right.
Bridgeview. It's Bayside.
This is a great way to end our conversation. For any type of books, banned books, or just books in general, to try to encourage literacy in the communities. We just need to get out there more, promote the books, get into the community, let them know that these books are available, because some people just don't even know that these books exist. So I think we've learned a lot from our ladies here about getting into the community and different ways to get into the community. We can follow them on their social media sites. If you all would like to stop and talk to them after this is over, you can talk with them and get some more information. Thank you, ladies, for such a
Thank you.
Y'all don't know how much this means to me. This means a whole lot. I had to walk out because I started crying. I'm a big marshmallow person. But it means so much to me. You see the reverse so many times, and this is like what I live for. Okay, and I've met some of them. I've met in person. Some of them have been on Facebook. Some of them have been on my podcast, and we all have the tips. We all have the tools. So now let's just hit the ground running.
Yes. Yes.
So these ladies are going to hang out for another 15, 20 minutes. I'm not going to hold up their day. Again, I thank you. I thank you. I thank you. And I am the person I split the block a couple of times, so y'all might be getting other emails from me. But again, I thank everyone for coming. Please talk to your authors, follow them on social media, because you can see what they're doing. I know you have something coming up.
Me? I always got something coming up. I know I'll be, they have a Kwanzaa thing on the 1st. I think I'll be there in Charleston.
Okay. Miss Regina, she always got something going on.
Yeah.
We're getting to MLK parade. So you'll see Charleston Black Pride.
They have, so I'm with the YWCA, and we gonna have, like a youth MLK poetry thing. That's coming up.
That's coming up.
And then I'm doing the Joseph P. Riley Award
Okay.
board. That's how I heard about that.
Yes,
I saw
yes,
that.
we got that coming up.
So, and everyone
I'm not sure
else,
the date. I gotta look at the flyer.
somebody who's always gonna be there for our kids.
Yes.
Someone,
Yes.
we might have to travel to go see somebody, but hey, she's always on the go. And we have the young lady in the middle. Please follow them so the word doesn't just stop here. Okay? I made sure to show this on my social media because this is what I do. I advocate for African American books. That's why, that's me, SC Book Gap. So please, 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 don't let it die here. Just don't. You guys have a good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.